Welcome to WEFTEC Now. I'm Travis Loop with the Water Environment Federation. Very glad to be joined here by Forrest Robinson, President of Mission Communications. Forrest, could you tell me a little bit about your company?
Mission is we're approaching our 20th birthday. We service about 3,000 utilities throughout North America. We pioneered cellular SCADA over 20 years ago, so we're really proud to be part of this WEF presentation today, Travis.
Fantastic. I want to talk about cloud computing with you. We hear a lot about this, right? What does it actually mean?
Well, cloud computing is really a broad term. It goes back to the early days of engineering drawings, typically the telco kind of folks, to connote all of the things that are complicated that you don't have to worry about. Let's take this building, for example, and talk about the electricity. We don't care about where the power plant is. All we care about is that the voltage is right, the frequency is right, and the power is highly available in good times and bad. If there is some kind of crisis, natural disaster, we're trusting that the utility has the resources, the skilled people, and the hardware to keep the system running in a highly reliable manner. Likewise, cloud computing means that you don't have to worry about all the details of the routers and the security and the software and the hardware. You just count on the cloud provider doing all of that stuff in a highly reliable manner.
Yeah, so we hear that a lot. Do we take it for granted?
Well, you know, the cloud analogy, the term, it's an interesting and kind of simplistic, but actually it's a very good term, because clouds change, but standards don't. And by that, cloud providers are always keeping these things current, updating software, adding features transparently to the user. Likewise, the electric power utility, behind the scenes, they're choosing, do we use coal, natural gas, solar? So they're changing all of these things, and if as long as it's transparent to us, we want them to do what they need to do to keep the lights on. Likewise, a cloud computing provider is going to enhance their services and keep the system highly available for the benefit of all users.
Yeah, you mentioned SCADA when you're talking about your company. Before we talk about that, what does SCADA mean?
Well, yeah, it's a kind of an unruly acronym. The SCADA, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. Starting with that data acquisition part, that's we might say the remote telemetry, getting the data in from remote assets. And with that comes the monitoring and alarming and alerting to tell your staff if something's abnormal. The first part of it, supervisory control, it complements the local control. DCS, or distributed control system, is the fundamental control. Supervisory can provide additional little enhancements to that. It doesn't replace local control, but so our services, we also call it managed SCADA.
Yeah, what does that mean, to be managed?
So we're handling all of the details, including the relationships with the carriers and the cellular carriers, that is. We're handling all of the software features and the support and the hardware and storage and backups and security, the staffing of everything to keep all of that running. And it's very difficult for a utility to do these, to amortize the costs with a limited number of users, whereas the typical cloud computing solution provider has lots more users to amortize the cost. So we're able to do all of this and keep the costs amazingly low, provide lots of benefits.
And not just the cost, but that's a lot of logistics that they'd have to worry about and things to keep track of. So you really give them this kind of comprehensive solution then.
Well, absolutely right. It's a challenge to run a utility these days. Yeah. Despite the good economy, budgets are limited and the skilled staff is hard to come by. The aging workforce and all. These are real problems that utilities have to deal with.
Sure. And so this is really like an in-house solution.
Well, no, we would say the plant. Most medium and larger utilities have a plant SCADA system, the wastewater treatment plant, water processing plant. Ours is a cloud solution for, we call it, the assets outside of the gate. So all of those assets are vitally important to the collection side of the typical wastewater utility, small water systems, and so we're able to provide all those services to complement the plant SCADA, and we keep the more difficult assets to maintain, since they are distributed, have the data flowing.
Yeah, so these can really mesh together then and complement
Right,
what they have. I see.
Yep.
Security is a really big issue these days, and I was hoping you could talk about how these systems approach that issue and how they compare.
Well, security, it's absolutely vital these days, and cloud versus traditional or client server kind of approaches, regardless, security, it's important in all cases. There's no silver bullet to security. Security is, if you read about it, you'll hear about a layered defense in depth strategy, and we could really talk this whole session on security, and it can get very weedy. But the best providers, the cloud providers, do have an advantage in that, since we're focused on our one task, we're able to have the skilled folks to do this really, really well. And again, by being focused, we're able to eliminate some of the vulnerabilities that by doing too much. But if for our guests that are taking advantage of the video part of this podcast, back to the cloud analogy, clouds with normally we think of clouds as all good things. So with clouds, the spring rains and the euphoria of being on cloud 9. But along with clouds comes storms and lightning and floods. And so a well-designed system has to be prepared to be resilient through these kind of problems and threats. And again, the cloud provider, because being focused on this, and the fact that we're able to have the infrastructure in a very ideal situation, cloud providers typically do have advantages. If you see our graphic of our kind of high-level architecture up on the screen now, starting at the bottom left, you'll see in that gray area the mission remote terminal units is what we call them. They're protected by the cellular carrier's private network that's been made on our behalf, and that data immediately flows through our firewall, and only our firewall, into that right-hand side where we take care of all the storage and the archives and the backups. If you move up to the right, utility operators are going to access our data via their web browser on their smartphone or tablet, any web-enabled device, using the same kind of security that our online banking relies on. And it's interesting, today most people would agree that it's more secure to pay your vendor via online banking than it is to put a check in the mail. Wow. 20
Sure.
years ago, people were a little bit concerned that, online banking might be dangerous, but actually times have changed. If you're looking in the center of this graph, we've got the OPC connection for the plant SCADA, so it's very possible for our information to also flow into the plant SCADA. But if you look at that firewall, there are actually only 3 real penetrations through that firewall. And using a house analogy, by having fewer doors, your house is more secure. By having windows that are so small that a burglar can't fit through the window, that's more secure. Putting the window up 5 or 10 stories is more secure than at ground level. And by having a streamlined, straightforward system that's more or less isolated from lots of other tasks, there are inherent security advantages. Technically, we would call our system a private cloud, which means that our system is not running adjacent to other tenants' stuff, so we know exactly how it performs. But that's, again, one of these more technical subtleties of the system.
That house analogy is terrific. That helps a non-technical person like me understand kind of what you're talking about there. Excellent. There's a lot of different providers out there, solution providers, and issues and options with the cloud. How should someone or a company, a utility, go about choosing, a solution?
Well, clearly, cull your selection to the folks who provide the services that you need. Then look at some of the public-facing documentation, because security really starts at the top. Management's got to be completely invested in it, which means documentation, policies, and procedures, and then internal monitoring. Reputation is very important. But doing nothing is also not secure. Steve Jobs famously said, "What we don't do is just as important as what we do do." And utility managers wear lots of hats. You wear the hydrologic hat, you wear the engineer's hat, you wear the project manager's hat, the people hat to recruit new staff, the budget hat to get the money to pay for all this stuff. So the IT part of it, the IT hat may be one hat that you don't have to wear. That allows you to have the time to focus on the things that you and your utility only can do.
Well, makes a lot of sense. So I'm really curious kind of what might be beyond the cloud, which is a big philosophical question in a way, but what's beyond the cloud?
Well, these days you're starting to hear these buzzwords: machine learning, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and all that. These kind of buzzwords things have been happening in this area for a while. They're all just different ways of saying getting the information from the field and using that information more thoroughly, deeper. And in our case, our system for probably 18 of our 20 years has been notifying users, operators of abnormalities. For example, a pump that ran longer or shorter today than it has typically for the previous month. That could be an indication of a ragged up pump or a stuck check valve or a worn out volute or impeller of a pump. We have lots of these kind of I call them common sense type of alerts to things that could be improved. And if you do improve them, benefits pay off tremendously. It's reduced energy costs. Pumping water costs a lot in energy, but also reduced wear and tear on pumps and improves the chances that you're going to be in compliance. You don't have to do any of that kind of painful part of the compliance business. The bottom line is that all of the next things are based on data. Data does not have to be hard or expensive to get these days with cloud-based solutions. In fact, we have, it's fairly common, I don't know, once every month or two, we'll get a call from a utility where they're perhaps a new utility commission and they're in the process of transitioning over to us. They have a critical asset that went down and they don't want to go to the weekend without being able to monitor it, and the parts and service for the other system are going to take time to get. So they ask, can we overnight the solution? And absolutely, vast majority of our stuff is available tomorrow morning. Takes only a couple hours to install, and immediately the data is flowing, alarms are there, and so we're able to do all this stuff amazingly simply and fast because it's a pre-engineered solution that just simply works right out of the box.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Forrest, very informative. Thank you so much for the time and the information. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you all for watching. For more interviews, please visit weftec.org/now.